Happy today. I am William Brown from IamWilliamBrown.com. This is Solopreneur Conversations. Each week I bring in a guest to talk about some of the things that are happening on our solopreneur journey. Sometimes it feels like we are all by ourselves. And the more that we get information, the more that we get an understanding of what's available to help us to really stand up fully for ourselves within our work, within our relationships, our business relationships, our personal relationships, because sometimes those suffer because we're starting a new thing, and for ourselves, so we can take care of ourselves. So I'm honored to have this conversation today. About empathy. And so the question or the conversation that we're going to have today is around how can empathy superpower your work? And what exactly does that mean as empathy as a superpower? So as I do, I invite my guest in so we can have a conversation. Good afternoon. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I am doing great. So this is the moment where I invite my guests to introduce themselves however it feels comfortable for them.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for the opportunity. My name is Kevin Shah. I use he, him pronouns, and I am the CEO and co-founder of Jago, which is a company that's focused on helping people understand and seek to understand one another and make empathy and learning a daily habit. In that mission. I started this company early this summer and late spring, and I'm really just it's getting exciting to find a little bit of traction and a little bit of progress. But
Right.
as you know, William, and I'm sure a
Right.
lot of the listeners would know that it's a hard battle, and I'm excited to be able to come and share some of my thoughts, insights, and learn more.
Yeah, that's great, and it's definitely congratulations on what you're doing. It's like sometimes when we feel like we're called to do something, and then we want to do something, and then we're kind of like look at what we're doing, right?
Yeah.
So the question of today is how can empathy superpower your work?
Yeah.
Try to help me understand what does that mean? How does that question show up for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's in every aspect of professional work. When you talk about, I think one of the most common things that people might understand is customer service or customer
Mm,
care.
right.
That's where if you, and this isn't being sympathetic or being nice or being kind. This is actually understanding your customer and their emotional motivation and how they're feeling, and then trying to connect on that. That's
Right.
when you can sort of superpower your empathy. So, like a simple example could be, let's say I'm on a phone call with you and you've got some problems with the internet, and you call me and I'm like, hey, you're like, Kevin, I've got problems with the internet. And I could say, you know, do these things, nothing is working. Sorry,
Right.
I don't know what else can I do. And let me take you to my supervisor. That's actually an act of, I'm following the process. I'm not actually being empathetic.
Mm,
But as an organization, as leaders, if we empower the customer service people to be empathetic, to do what it takes to connect with that customer, I could approach that same situation differently. And I could be like, hey, William, I totally get it. It can be so frustrating. When my internet goes out, it's frustrating. It's
mm,
terrible. Let me see what I can do to make this work for you. Changes the whole conversation.
right.
Now I'm in the same boat as you. You feel that I'm feeling your pain, and now I am working hard to fix that for you. It's superpowers. Now you will have an emotional connection. It'll be harder for you to leave that customer in the future.
Right.
Um, and I see it in leadership. One of the things that executives and other leaders, as people managers, empathy can be so powerful. You will make fiercely loyal team members who will be productive and happy and engaged and deliver better financial results for you if you practice empathy, because they will truly follow you, believe that you care about them, you understand them. And that's what at the end of the day, what people and humans want is to be understood.
Right. I think they, like I said, as I have these good news, bad news moments, within my business. It's like, good news, I'm the boss. Bad news, I'm the boss, right? And so the biggest level of empathy that shows up for me is self empathy, right?
Hmm.
To really kind of um, be there for myself and not just listen to this, I guess my pity party, right? Because within the solopreneur journey, there's, I don't know about you, but I have many, you know, I have on pity parties on rotation, right? But how can we show empathy for ourselves?
Yeah, I mean, I had similar moments recently where I was talking to someone who was a potential mentor yesterday, in fact, and they didn't believe in what I was doing. They didn't get it. They weren't, and I was trying to communicate. I'm like, they're like, I care about empathy, but I don't get it, and I'm not going to be someone who would use it. And that was a moment where I felt down, and I felt
Mm,
um, like, oh, what am I doing? And a lot of the solo entrepreneurs and solopreneurs, they go through that sort of experience. And in that moment, I had to sort of tell myself, well, what are you feeling? You're
mm,
feeling anxiety, you're feeling anxious, asking yourself that question. And then saying, like, why are you feeling that? And then, do you believe in you? Yes, I do
mm,
believe in you.
right,
Okay, so keep going. What you can do in that moment is learn from that feedback. What are the key gems you can take away, and
right,
ignore the things that don't help you in your
right.
mission.
Oh, it's like that's easier said than done, right?
Oh, it was a hard evening. I'll be honest. I
Right,
and One of the things I did for myself in that moment is, if you have a trusted friend or a spouse or a partner or a
right,
parent or anyone,
right,
you talk to them.
right,
This is one of those where it's hard to sort of say it as like, hey, I started with like, I'm feeling really anxious. I told my husband, I said, I'm feeling very anxious. He's like, why? Why are you feeling anxious? I'm like, this happened. And I'm like, oh. And he's like, yeah, it sucks. He didn't say you shouldn't.
right.
He just said it sucks. And that acknowledgement helped. And so part of self-empathy is actually sharing that sort of pain a
Mm,
little bit. And
right,
that helps because you'll see other people are with you. And so it
right,
reduces that. So it gives you that strength to, when you say it's easier said than done, absolutely,
right,
it's hard.
right.
But you can make it easier by inviting someone else to join you to help you take you out of there.
I like how you said a big part of it is by sharing it with others. Um, sometimes earlier on in my entrepreneurial journey, I have a very supportive wife,
Mm-hmm.
but I felt that she was more sympathetic than had empathy
Mm,
for me.
mm.
She was just, "Oh, you had a terrible day, and that's just, okay, go back again." The other thing, how do you think, partners can really show up, for, for their entrepreneurial, partner, the way that it'll make a difference and not feel like, "Oh, I'm just such a loser right now."
I mean, one of the best ways I've experienced, and I'm just going to talk from my experience. I'm not an expert on this, but like my
Absolutely.
experience has been um, just asking questions in a
Mm,
way that's not challenging, but
mhm.
more empathetic. So, for example, in that situation, my husband, when I just shared the story, he didn't say, you're better, you're stronger. That's sympathy. That's like more trying to bring me up. He said, oh yeah, I totally understand your anxiety. So I
Right,
felt like they understood me. And then they said, like, why, what are the things that you're feeling anxious about? So it again wasn't an invitation of why, like, instead of
right,
using why, use the start with what or how.
right.
A really good book by Chris Voss, The Negotiations. I forgot the title. I'll look it up, but it's by
Okay,
Chris Voss. It's about negotiation and talks about asking those questions, and using what or how questions invites that sense of empathy.
got it.
And so the way they can be supportive is, okay, if something good happens or bad happens, obviously be there and celebrate together and celebrate each other's achievements. But when something is not going as well, the way they can be there for you is, yeah, you're right. That sucks. What can make, what do you think is causing that? And that's
Right,
almost like therapy in a way, but it's just communication. Gives you a
right.
space to sort of air out what you're doing, vent a little. and that
Right.
sort of softens a lot of what you're feeling.
I got it. I think there's some time for me where I get caught up with is the language that it's being used, or the language that is not being used. At the certain moment. Are there any like empathy keywords to listen for, or to use to kind of help, kind of strengthen um, the understanding, or recognize that, you know, my wife is really trying to be, empathetic right now, and I should kind of let, the frustration and all that go, versus like, is she just saying this just because, she's my wife? It's like I had my, I'll use my sister, and now she was like, "Oh, I'm so proud of you." And the first thing that I said after that was like, "Says his adoring sister," and she's like, "Shut up," right? And she's like, "Can I just be proud of you?" But it's that type of thing. Sometimes when our partners and people, our family and people that are trying to be supportive of us, we kind of dismiss it because we rather. I'll speak for myself. Rather just continue to have my pity party, right? With no invites, right? And just kind of go from there.
Yeah, so part of it, like when that happens, like what story you said, what I try to do is I say, well, do you think this is an achievement? And the other person is, yeah, absolutely, I worked hard for it. Do you think we should celebrate it? Yes, we should celebrate it. So do you think you worked hard for it? You want to celebrate it? So let's recognize it. And what that changed it is, instead of like when someone does that pity party,
Right.
it gives that person an, yes, I did work hard. I did. And let me take a moment to celebrate it, or recognize that. So
Right.
in the way really empathy comes around, when you mentioned keyword, is really those questions.
Mm.
Instead of saying, what sympathy is like, can be like, oh, it sucks for you. I wish it
Right.
doesn't. I wish it doesn't suck for you.
Right.
With empathy, it could be like, oh, I feel anxiety just like you, or I'm feeling how you're feeling. Let's sit with it. Let's sit with it. Let's
Right.
talk about it. Let's
Right.
not just dismiss it. And that's the difference.
Hmm. I am so, as I'm thinking, as a solopreneur, sometimes there are many moments, right?
Mm-hmm.
Many parts of the day that I am by myself, right? That
Mm-hmm.
I'm not hearing other people's stories. It's just a story that's going on in my head. And that's the one thing that I like about your app, is that there's a couple. I guess you can explain it, but it's like we've had this conversation before, because I was going to say I'm kind of telling you your app, but there's a couple. You hear like a couple stories, a day, to kind of hear a different perspective, a different thing, and I think the more that I'm able to kind of get out of my head about selling, right? To get out of my head about presenting and all the other things that I have to do within my business, then I can hear these stories to kind of me have a listening for the
Mm-hmm.
person that I'm on the call for, right? And
Yeah.
so is that
Yeah.
I don't know if I talk myself in a way. That's how I'm going to use it. That's how I'm going to go to the gym, the empathy gym, right?
No, I think what you said is really an important thing, especially during the pandemic. We're all sort of secluded, and so it's even harder to have that connection. And especially in
Right,
your, like, solopreneurs or people working to build something from scratch, or really trying to build something, it can
right.
be hard. So a couple of things that I've done is, one, I've found some trusted people, not even my spouse, like outside, who I
Mm,
can reach out, like, hey, can we chat? And I can just vent to. This is someone I trust. I can be just by myself. I don't have to put up this facade of like I know what I'm doing, or
right,
I'm driving this. I can just be like, hey, that sucked. I feel shitty about this, or whatever that might be. Right?
right,
I can do that, and they are there. And so finding someone like that can be really powerful. And it's hard to do that sometimes. It's easier
right.
said, but I think it's a good one to work towards. And the second thing I would say is also sharing your story.
Hmm,
Putting yourself out there can help, because one thing I've noticed is, like, platforms like LinkedIn or Twitter. I'm less on Twitter, more on LinkedIn recently, but putting myself out there a little bit, people
right,
have recognized and acknowledged it. It makes you feel great. And
right,
it gives you that motivation to keep going, even in your darkest times and your moments. And we all have those. I think the part we don't acknowledge is that people don't have dark moments, or people don't have down moments. Most people go through that. Acknowledge it. And then I put myself out, like I talk about how hard it is to go through the Apple app review process. We have the app in the Google Play Store, but Apple it's still not yet approved, and it has been months long struggle. And I
Right.
went into depression a weekend because of it.
Mm,
But what it allowed me to do is finding moments where I allowed myself to be a little bit down, and then okay, now I've built up the strength to go fight again another day,
right.
and I can
Wow.
now start seeing the light at the end of the tunnel.
Right. So yeah, there's a lot of sharing, and so, because I will say that there has been the reason why I've resisted um, empathy on some level and didn't see it as a superpower, especially in my work, is because I felt that there was more assumptions on my
Mm,
part than actually a listening for someone's story. So, because, I fill in the dots and go, oh, okay,
mm,
this is what I think they're dealing with, instead of having a conversation with them, right? You know, and I think, it's so much easier to kind of like fill in the blanks than to have people tell you their story. And so I think the power of what you said is, I think a large part of empathy also, what I'm getting is is listening,
yeah.
is more listening than sharing. Sharing is a part of it. Being vulnerable is a part of it. And the power of that, the
Hmm.
super, I love, I will share with you. I have, an alias Batman, so,
Ah.
I have the mask and everything, but, for me, this is how it shows up. So it doesn't get
Yeah.
too crazy. I don't have the suit or anything, but I just have the mask. Right? But it's like, that how Batman shows up for me is
Hmm.
that, I have the resources to defend things that I'm passionate about, my loved ones, what's right in the world. Try that I am going to use the resources that I have available to make a difference in the world. And so that's the only way Batman shows up for me.
Hmm.
So it's like I have no desire to like live in a cave or or like swing from buildings or anything like that. All that other kind of stuff. But really recognizing, and so I'm bringing the superpower alias that I
Hmm.
have,
Hmm.
and the the recognition of empathy as a superpower, as
Hmm.
that there is, I believe that there is a sense where you are aware and you're not aware of the power.
Mm.
But the more that you're willing to stay within, I would say the fight or the gym, the conversations, the listening, then you become more powerful. And I think that's that's what you're encouraging. That's what your
Yeah.
app and your business is really it, because we have the power, but we don't know yet how powerful it actually is for us.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And first, I would love to see you jumping around caves and buildings. I think that would be amazing. But at the same time, oh, I dropped my mic. But at the same time, I think what you said is so important. The part of what we're trying to do with Jago, with the app, is to remove those assumptions, like you mentioned. So one of the things when you go into the app, you create an intersectional profile. So you just start with that, the fact that everyone comes from different backgrounds. You're not this one-dimensional person. You're not just a black person or a gay person or a trans person. You have various aspects that you're bringing in, and then so that's breaking down the first sense of assumptions in people itself. And then the second thing is, every day when we say watch one theme, and you get two stories around that. So let's say the theme for today is leadership or negotiation or teamwork or personal finance.
Great.
And we show that actually here's a story of someone, and you might agree with the story, you might be familiar with it. And here's a story from someone you are not as close to. And you realize that every topic, every theme has other connected themes and has different perspectives. So it starts subconsciously breaking down the idea that let's not make the assumption first. Let's try to first listen and understand that story
Mm,
before I make any assumptions. And
right.
that's and being aware. And I think the work you do in your coaching and awareness is so powerful, is being
Right.
aware when you're making an assumption, so that you can then stop yourself, take a break, and be like, let me now listen to your story.
Right. Hmm. Yeah, I think yeah, there's a lot of things that are coming up for me, and how I look at my business, how I look
Mm-hmm.
at my customers and my clients, and it's like, how I show up and work. That the more that I'm able to let go the assumptions and just have a listening for the story, then I can have empathy. Then empathy will show up. Then, even without a cape, I don't know if you have a cape or not, but without the cape, really be there for yourself and for other people. So, yeah. Is there any last thing that is coming up for you that you would have entrepreneurs kind of look at empathy within their business?
Yeah, I would say the last thing is really look at putting empathy as a core sort of DNA. So as you're building your business, as you're inviting more people into your space, customers and employees or whoever you drive that, think about how you can build empathy into every aspect of it. Because when you do that, it truly builds this immense amount of value and the effect. I'll give you a quick example.
Okay.
One is in our app in Jago, we don't have a like button. So when you watch a story, you don't say like it like every other platform. What we have is we ask a question. We say, do you want to thank the storyteller for their courage or
Hmm.
recognize their courage? We put empathy. That's an example of putting empathy into the app. We got feedback from our early users that this is so cool that I get to thank someone for their courage. That has never happened before.
Hmm.
When you put that empathy and intention behind it. So think about what are you doing? Where can you add empathy into that? Because towards the user or towards the storyteller, because people are sharing, being vulnerable. It's a courageous act. Let's be courageous and let's share that courage and actually recognize it. So that's what I would recommend.
Well, wonderful. Well, thank you very much. This has been a great conversation and very informative. I'm looking forward to putting in my story and watching some stories to really build up the empathy, right? To really kind of, I feel like I have so many other powers. Hey, let's just get one more, right? And just,
Why not? It just gets
well,
better.
right not. Well, thank you very much. This has definitely been great.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, this is yeah, I'm looking at how empathy can show up in the DNA of my business. That's a great way of looking at it. There's so many things that that we are asked to put in our business, But today, Kevin asked us to put in empathy. It's a part of the DNA. I wonder if our customers will appreciate that. If our vendors or the people that we work with will appreciate that. So with that in mind, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you next week on Solopreneur Conversations.